This is the Metropolitan Council meeting on Wednesday, March 27th. Welcome. I'll call this meeting to order, and today we have a number of business items, but two information items, and which includes a transit update on all of our projects. So it's a good opportunity for that review. So unless there's any objection, I will assume that agenda is approved. On to our council minutes from the meeting held March 13th. If there's any corrections, edits, speak now. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion for approval.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those minutes are approved. And this is the point in the meeting where we invite members of the public to address the council on matters not on the agenda, and nobody has signed up in advance.
Correct.
Correct? So unless somebody runs to the podium, I will not have any comments today. But it brings us to our first business item, which is a joint report, a budget amendment, and I believe Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is my pleasure to bring forward business item 2024-15. It's a joint committee report, and it is the unified budget amendment. The 2024 first quarter and carry forward budget amendment makes changes to the operating budget in regional administration, community development, MTS, and Metro Transit, and changes to the capital budget in community development, MTS, and Metro Transit. The proposed amendment was reviewed and approved by the Community Development Committee on March 4th, the Transportation Committee on March 11th, and the Management Committee on March 13th. In regional administration, the amendment brings forward $2.8 million from the 2023 budget into the 2024 budget to complete equity projects approved by the council in 2021 and 2022, and the completion of contracts in communications, information services, and audit. The amendment also adds 19.75 FTEs, full-time employment equivalents, in information services, human resources, general counsel, and communications, primarily to support Metro Transit. In Metro Transit, the amendment brings forward $2.2 million in legislative appropriations for the Transit Service Intervention Project and the Highway 55 corridor analysis. It also adds 212 FTEs for the support of bus operations, cleanliness, and repair standards, asset preservation efforts focused on the state of good repair, and growing the Transit Rider Investment Program. In Metropolitan Transportation Services, or MTS, the amendment adds $1.4 million to the 2023 operating budget in fixed route services for contract rate adjustments. It also adds $11.9 million and two FTEs to this 2024 Metro Mobility budget. Lastly, it increases the pass-through budget for suburban transit providers by $7.7 million for microtransit service prescribed by the legislature, and $9.3 million for the SDPs for a one-time distribution of sales tax funds while a longer-term funding strategy is developed. In community development, the amendment brings $1.8 million and adds 3 FTEs into the 2024 budget for the continuation of projects in affordable housing, Imagine 2050 planning, and development of the Climate Action Plan. Turning to the capital budgets, the amendment closes 44 projects in community development and reduces the authorized capital program, or ACP, by $21.2 million. It also adds a total of $223 million to the transportation ACP. Most notably, it adds $26.6 million in sales tax funds to the Metro Transit and MTS ACPs for different asset preservation and capital projects. It also adds $100 million in funds from the Hennepin County for Southwest Corridor Green Line Extension Project. The individual projects and their changes are outlined in the tables in 9 and 11. So before I make the motion, that is a lot of money coming our way, in large part due to legislative action last spring that is coming forward now this year, and we are implementing it. And we do have staff available to answer any questions you might have, and I know Councilmember Barber's got a lot of her money tied up in this with transportation. So with that, Mr. Chair, the motion is that the Metropolitan Council authorizes the 2023 and 2024 unified budget as amended and in accordance with the attached tables.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. I would just echo what Councilmember Johnson said. This is a quarterly amendment, but it's unusually large because of all the changes we've had with legislation. But it is, and having said that, much more accurate as to
Yes.
our current operations.
And Mr. Chair, I just, again, we've all said this, but a big shout out to, the team that's at the Capitol, Judd and Hannah, but it was really with great appreciation that the legislature moved this money into all of these areas at the Met Council and beyond so that we can continue to advance the system that we're currently building out and then continue to make it safer. And also, and I want to do a shout out to Councilmember Barber and Charles Carlson too, working with our suburban transit providers, because there's this time where there's a phase where we're waiting for money to come in, but those suburban transit providers, could definitely use money. And so they came together and put forward a formula that is grounded in past formula history, and we're advancing money to those suburban transit providers too that I think is fairly liberal for them to utilize in their communities. And we've gone out and have been talking with about them that too. So anyway, I just wanted to, just say the impact that it's already having, and certainly on TRIP as well. So very grateful to the legislature again.
Great, thank you. Any questions? All right, this is a roll call vote because it's a budget item. And if we're ready to vote, I don't see any other questions. I will look to you, Jean.
Johnson?
Aye.
Chambliss?
Aye.
Tyrone Carter?
Aye.
Barber?
Aye.
Lilligren?
Aye.
Osmond?
Aye.
Vento?
Aye.
Tony Carter?
Aye.
Wolf?
Aye.
Cedarburg?
Aye.
And Charzeli.
Aye, we won't forget you or me, Gail, that's right. Thank you, that motion carried. Thank you. On to the consent business items. Is there a motion and a second to approve?
So
the
moved.
consent agenda? Thank you, second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, the consent business items are approved. On to our reports of our standing committees. There's no reports from Community Development nor Environment. There is a report from the Management Committee. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, it's my honor to bring forward business item 2024-64, and that is awarding wastewater bonds within established financial parameters. That's Resolution 2024-03. This business item requests adoption of Resolution 2024-3, which will authorize the issuance, sale, and award to the lowest bidder of approximately $62 million of general obligation wastewater revenue bonds. The resolution also dictates 3 financial parameters that must be met for the bonds to be sold. Specifically, Resolution 2024-3 will authorize the sale of the bonds provided the sale date is within 90 days, the size cannot exceed $66 million, and the interest rate cannot exceed 4.5%, although we are expecting about a 3.5% rate on this bond sale. The council is expecting to take bids for the bond on May 7th. This financing is part of the council's annual capital financing process, and bond proceeds will help fund environmental services, capital project expenditures for approximately 12 months. The Parks and Transit divisions currently don't need additional capital funding. The bonds will be a general obligation to the council, and the council will also pledge wastewater system revenues, which will repay the debt. No levy is expected for these bonds. This bond financing supports the Thrive outcomes of stewardship, as general obligation bonds are efficient and a low-cost funding source for capital expenditures. So with that, Mr. Chair, I would move that the Metropolitan Council adopts parameters Resolution 2024-3, which authorizes the issuance, sale, and award of general obligation debt within the established financial parameters, incurrence of a related insurance expenses, and execution of documents necessary to secure the funding.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Thank you. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carried. Councilmember Jens?
Yes, Mr. Chair. This item is business item 2024-72. This is the same week item. We just heard this in management today. And it is the Law Enforcement Labor Services Local 432 Full-Time Police Agreement. The Metropolitan Council's labor agreement with Law Enforcement Labor Services LELS Local 432 expired on December 31st of 2023. The union represents 80 full-time police officers who work for the Metro Transit Police Department. The parties reached a tentative agreement on February 26, 2024, and LELS number 432 membership ratified the agreement on March 18, 2024. Here are some of the highlights of the memorandum of understanding, and they include a 3-year contract effective January 1st, 2024 through December 31st, 2026, a compensation package that includes a 5.5% general wage increase in year 1, 4.5% general wage increase in year 2, and a 3.5% general increase in the 3rd year of the contract. In addition, there's a market rate adjustment of 2% to help meet recruitment and retention needs in this critical transit service. This adjustment will also be effective January 1st of 2024. The cost of the memorandum of understanding was reviewed by Finance and was negotiated within the parameters established by the council. This item was reviewed and approved today by the Management Committee. And Mr. Chair, I will just mention that, again, this relates to our stewardship, prosperity, and certainly making investments in our employees here at the council. So with that, Mr. Chair, I would move that the council moves to authorize the regional administrator to enter into a labor agreement with the Law Enforcement Labor Services, Local 432, effective January 1, 2024 through December 31, 2026.
Great, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? I think it's great. And I know the chief is very interested in recruiting new officers, so we'll be fair with this new agreement.
And Mr. Chair, I just want to, again, on all of the resolutions I brought forward today, I want to thank our staff. And again, I want to thank Marcy, who came before us today. This is another great, agreement that's been put in place, and I know she and her team work very hard. So just, again, to everybody from the Management Committee who's been working on these items, thank you very much.
Yeah, never easy work. Thanks. Congratulations, Marcy. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carried. On to transportation. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, council members, business item number 2025-45 is about the Metro Purple Line Bus Rapid Transit contract. In August 2022, the council executed the original contract with HNTB for approximately $3.7 million. Subsequently, the council has executed 2 amendments to this contract. The first one in July 2023 for additional services for an evaluation of a BRT route alternative along Maryland and Whitebear Avenue in St. Paul and Maplewood. That amendment increased the value of the contract by approximately $364,000. $100,000. The second one in November 2023 was a no-cost amendment to resume tasks suspended under the first agreement. The current amendment would increase the contract by approximately $3.3 million. This amendment is for environmental and peer review services to compare the alternative alignment along Maryland and Whitebear Avenue to the current project alignment along Bruce Vento Regional Trail Corridor. A sole source justification memo was reviewed and approved by Council Procurement. The scope of the environmental services included in this amendment is consistent with the scope of the original contract. HNTB is the current environmental lead for the Purple Line and has been consistently engaged with the project since 2018. The current stage of the Purple Line project is not a typical project milestone where a new environmental consultant would be hired. It is estimated that hiring and onboarding a new consultant team for environmental services would add 2 to 3 months to the project schedule and up to 10% additional cost to the amendment value. The Purple Line project schedule requires these environmental services to be completed by September 1st, 2025. Awarding this amendment to HNTP is the most cost-effective and expeditious way to complete these critical environmental services for the Purple Line project. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council authorize the Regional Administrator to execute Amendment 3 to Contract 22P031 with HNTP for Purple Line Bus Rapid Transit Environmental and Peer Review Services for a total contract value not to exceed $7,272,394.93.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? That motion carried. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, council members, business item number 2024-58 is regarding the designation of potential TOD sites. The list of potential TOD sites identifies council-owned properties that may be suitable for transit-oriented development. This action will update a list of potential TOD sites that was previously approved in 2017. 9 sites will be added to the list and 2 sites will be removed. The TOD fund may only be used to advance TOD opportunities on sites approved by the council. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council designate the attached list of council properties as potential TOD sites eligible for use of the TOD fund allocated to the TOD office. Funds will be used for expenses necessary to advance TOD opportunities on these sites. Examples of expenses include due diligence work such as title reports, surveys, appraisals, market studies, and engineering studies.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Cameron. Any discussion, questions? Councilmember Chambliss.
My question is, which sites were removed and what was the reason?
Anyway, we have Michael Krantz here to discuss.
Welcome.
Mr. Chair, council members, I'm Michael Krantz, Senior Manager of Transit-Oriented Development for Metro Transit. The 2 sites that were removed, the first one was the former MTPD headquarters. That was previously on the list but has been sold, so that one's being removed. The other one that's being removed is West River Road and 117th Avenue. That facility is closed, and similarly, the plan is to sell that facility, which would make it no longer a TOD opportunity site.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? I have to say, it's a long list, even without those 2.
Yes.
Yeah, impressive. All right, if there's no more discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye, opposed? That motion carried. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, council members, business item number 2024-67 is the council's consistency review of the Metropolitan Airports Commission's Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport 2040 Long-Term Comprehensive Plan. The council reviews airport long-term comprehensive plans under requirements in state statute. The council is charged with reviewing these LTCPs to determine that the comprehensive plan has an area-wide effect, a multi-community effect, or have a substantial effect on metropolitan development, and for consistency with the Regional Development Guide in conformance with the state's aviation system in the Transportation Policy Plan. Staff conducted a review of the MSP Airport 2040 Long-Term Comprehensive Plan and found it to be consistent with the Regional Development Guide and in conformance with the 2040 TPP. The MSP 2040 LTCP replaces the previous long-term comprehensive plan and moves the planning horizon to 2040. The plan forecasts steady growth for both passengers and aircraft operations with a projected 28 million passenger boardings and 510,000 aircraft operations by 2040. While passenger counts are projected to reach record levels, airport operations are not anticipated to be greater than the historic peaks or previous projections. Aircraft noise impacts are expected to increase with an increase in aircraft operations. These impacts have been modeled into 2040 in the plan, which will aid local governments in future land use planning considerations. To accommodate the growth, the plan outlines minor airfield improvements, capacity enhancements to Terminal 2, and terminal access and circulation improvements to both terminals. The plan does not anticipate major projects which would change the airport's classification or result in significant regional impacts. Staff also confirmed that the MAC held a significant and adequate public engagement process in the development of the comprehensive plan. The process included over 27 public meetings, including a 60-day public comment period to gather feedback from the public and stakeholders. The TAB and its technical committees also reviewed the LTCP and support the findings and recommended motion. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council find that the final draft MSP International Airport 2040 LTCP has a multi-city impact as well as conforms to the council systems and is consistent with council policies.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions?
Mr. Chair, I will just say, as our council's representative to the MAC, I have been very impressed with the thoughtfulness with which they put together this plan and phased out the process. And so thinking about both funding streams as well as how to phase out, particularly the Terminal 2 expansion, has been really important. So very excited that our airport partners have been thoughtful in putting together this plan. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, and thank you for your service on the MAC board and being our liaison and connection. Appreciate that. Any other questions, thoughts? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carried. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, council members, business item number 2024-68, same week, is regarding the award of a construction contract for the Metro E-Line ABRT project. The Metro E-Line construction contract includes 53 BRT platforms along a 13.3-mile corridor following France Avenue, Hennepin Avenue, 4th Street, and University Avenue from Southdale Transit Center in Edina through Minneapolis to the Metro Green Line Westgate Station in St. Paul. The project will also construct and operate a restroom, fiber communication infrastructure, and locally requested pedestrian, bicycle, and signal improvements at several intersections, developed and funded both in coordination with Hennepin County and the City of Minneapolis. The invitation for bids for this project was advertised January 9, 2024. 4 bids were received. Marcon Construction Incorporated submitted the low, responsive, and responsible bid and is recommended for award. The Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity assigned a disadvantaged business enterprise goal of 20% for this solicitation. OEEO determined that the firm being recommended for the award has met the DBE requirements of this contract. A same-week council action is requested to ensure timely contract award and construction start. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to execute contract 23P210 with Marcon Construction Incorporated for construction of the Metro E-Line Arterial BRT project in an amount not to exceed $39,416,070.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did have some conversation and positive conversation about this at Transportation Committee. This is our 5th ABRT line. Councilmember Wolf and I were around for the first opening in 2016 of the A-line, and we've been consistently seeing these projects that we've been building with our local partners and seeing these corridors just routinely get updated and improved and take some of our highest frequency routes and turn them into really what is becoming the central focus of some of our transit system. I mean, if we look at some of the numbers we just got from our ridership report for last year, overall, the BRT system was up 11% over the last year. But when we look at the first year of the D-line in operation, and the D-line correlates with the Route 5, that corridor, ridership in that corridor went up 87%. So these investments in this work that we're doing with this ABRT system is really a wonder, and I think is really, we are highly recognized for what we're doing nationally, and to our staff who had the vision of doing and getting this system on board and building it out, and really to colleagues for continual support, whether it's here, the city, county partners tab, the legislature who's provided some bonding money. It's really been a collective effort that really is showing great impact to the region.
Thank you. Well, I certainly concur with that. And although I wasn't here, I have my A-line T-shirt, and it is really exciting how they have, in a short amount of time, we've developed this becoming a system. And as one who drives on Hennepin Avenue every day, I'll say the utility work is well underway, and I know we're doing this in conjunction with the City of Minneapolis and others.
And Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I just would like to add, as we heard from our regional administrator at the State of the Region, we have the money to build out the system that has the lines on the maps. And we didn't know that a year ago, and it is a big deal. So I think that also just provides our riders in our region a lot of confidence in what we're doing, and that, and the feedback and the data that's coming back is really well-positioned to continue this work. So hats off to transportation. I know you guys have been doing a lot of lift, but we're there and we're getting there, so thank you.
Any other, Councilmember Carter?
Yes, and I just wanted to share that although St. Paul is not a partner in this work, it's exciting to see this coming in to the Westgate Station. And as we talked at Transportation Committee about the collaboration, it provides an opportunity for other things to happen around this construction as we work together in partnership with St. Paul on streetscape improvement and things of that sort. So thank you, Met Council members who've been here for a while, for your foresight and for these opportunities to see transit grow throughout our region in this way. Thank you.
All right, any other comments? All right, hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Aye, opposed, that motion carried. Thank you, and thank you, Councilmember Barber. That concludes our business items. There are no other business items, so we get into the information presentations, and we're having a transit update, but first, a scenario planning of consolidated findings and connections to our policy related to our Imagine 2050. And Baris, you're here. Welcome.
I'm going to bring my colleague Dan as well.
Please.
Crashing
Welcome.
the party, he had some.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Good afternoon, Chair Zeli and council members. My name is Barishka Mushtaz, and I'm a planning analyst at the Community Development Division. And today I'm here to talk to you about the consolidated findings of the scenario work that we've been working on for quite a while now. And hopefully we'll be talking a little bit about the policy implications as well. And so far, our work has been about our existing policies, and at this point, the work is turning toward future policies. So in this presentation, I'll talk a little bit about that. So in today's presentation, the purpose of the presentation is to bring the scenario analysis findings all together and talk about them in a sort of a holistic fashion. And we also want to share with you the overall findings of the report. And the hope is for these findings to set the context for a high-level policy guidance. And these findings themselves should be summarized in a memo that accompanies this presentation. So some of these findings, you've heard about them in previous presentations, and today, as I said, will be all coming together. Throughout the presentation, you will see some slides that you have seen before. I'm only introducing them very briefly so that I can refresh your memories a little bit. But I will start by just briefly talking about why we're doing scenario planning. So the simple idea is to understand and plan for future contingencies. That's what we are doing scenario planning. And we do look at extreme scenarios such as, on the cone you can see, such as A, B, C, D. And these are, in our case, there are 5 scenarios, and these are all extreme scenarios so that we can actually analyze everything that, all kinds of futures that lie in between these extremes. So effectively what we're looking at is all the points that you can see in that oval in the cone. And so we are not looking at an ideal scenario. We're not picking a single scenario. We're simply exploring all scenarios. This is also another slide that you have seen. I will not go into the details too much. I simply want to remind you what the scenarios are. We use 2 uncertainties to pick these scenarios. The first one is how much the region will grow. We don't quite know how much we're going to grow. There are many external factors that impact our growth rate. And we don't know where exactly people would decide to live and where businesses will locate. And what those locational preferences would mean in terms of market demand. So in effect, you see city planners and regional planners being very concerned about different uncertainties about market demand, and they usually don't know how the demand would play out in their jurisdictions. So in that aspect, the scenario planning is really a good tool to explore different types of market conditions. And in this green chart, you see the whole range of futures that are allowed by the imagination that we have with our scenarios. And I want to emphasize that these are reasonable and plausible scenarios because we looked at our existing policy plans. Our models are based on our existing policy plans. And they're plausible growth rates because we looked at previous experiences and tried to simulate models that are based on previous growth rates. And as we look at scenarios, we're looking at different types of residential preferences that lead to different regional growth patterns. And in this case, we are talking about a compact development pattern, which is development taking place in areas that are already developed and they have higher densities, and they're closer to the region's center in general. And for dispersed scenarios, we are looking at development that's taking place in lower density areas that haven't been developed yet. And in those areas, we are looking at development that happens in a dispersed fashion across the region's suburban and rural areas. So when I talk about compact development, we're really looking at, when we simulated these models, we're looking at the higher end of the density that the comp plans dictate. So communities themselves have decided what type of density should be put in place, and we're simply using the higher end of those density ranges to simulate these growth scenarios. And when it comes to dispersed growth scenarios, we simply use the lower end of those density ranges. This is a slide that we just created after we presented the findings to our Regional Development Guide work group. They gave us some really good advice. And to clarify some of the issues that kind of kept occurring, the questions that kept coming up, we decided to emphasize the two components of compactness versus dispersion. So far, I've been talking a lot about the growth aspect of compactness. And by that, what I mean is where in the region people are locating. So it refers to the location of growth across the region or within the region. So when I talk about growth, I'm also referring to growth that's happening really all across the region, in the sense that no area of the region in these scenarios is losing any population. So every part of the region grows in all of these scenarios. And primarily, when we talk about growth, the guidance of growth is a responsibility of the council. When we talk about development, I'm specifically referring to the location and built form of development within each community. So we're basically asking the question, where within each community are people locating? And what does the form of that development look like? So when I use the word built form, I'm specifically referring to a development's density, its location in relation to existing infrastructure, its contiguity and connectedness to other developments, the size of its footprint, and the extent to which it encourages alternative modes of travel. So in that sense, built form really could look very different in different places. So you can have compact growth, for instance, happening in a compact, in a community in the region's center, and that would look very different from compact form that's happening in an area of the region that is far out from the center. So you can think, for instance, Stillwater downtown is compact form, but it looks very different from any compact form that you would see in Minneapolis. So built form could really take different shades depending on where it is in the region. And overall development is basically, when it's guided, it's the primary responsibility of cities and townships. You have also seen this big chart, and I know it's very busy. I'll try to keep it short and point to sections of it for you. This is the part of the conversation where we're really pivoting from the analysis portion to the policy conversation. And as I mentioned before, there are two different phases to scenario planning. One of them is the analysis phase, the other one is the policy phase. And the idea is that the analysis phase will give you enough data to have fact-based or information-based conversations, policy conversations. So for the analysis phase, we asked 3 different questions. The first question that we asked was, how might the region's growth vary? And those are the scenarios that we analyzed so far. I have discussed them in detail. And then we asked the second question, which is, how would those futures impact the region? Over the course of the last year and a half, you have heard many presentations by staff from different technical areas about the impacts of these scenarios on the region and the council. And then finally, we looked at these impacts that you have heard about and compared them to our regional goals to explore how the impacts align with our goals. And in effect, what we asked is whether or not the scenarios made it harder or easier for us to reach our regional goals. So the third question, the response to this particular question, I haven't really discussed with you. I will do so shortly. You will see the summaries or the detailed list of these findings in the memo accompanying this presentation as well. But for now, I want to just point to the fact that, currently we're at that red arrow in that chart. This is where the transition between analysis and policy is happening. And this is the point where we're really beginning to ask the fourth question, which is, what policies are needed to achieve our goals, especially under uncertainty? I should say that staff has been informed by these findings as they finish their models, and they have been using the findings as they continue to draft policies, objectives, and goals, so that the policies that are drafted are in alignment with our goals under different conditions of uncertainty. Now, I'll turn back to the relationship between the second and the third column, the alignment between the findings and the goals that the council has. So, as I mentioned, we presented all these findings, so none of them are new to you. What is new is that we, as the staff, analyzed how well each future aligned with our goals. And we, as I mentioned again, explored how easy or difficult it is for us to reach our goals under each scenario. And for instance, just to highlight what we have done, I have an example from land use. And we have had 2 land use findings, and the first one stated that in compact scenarios, we use land more intensely and efficiently, regardless of how much the region grows. And what does that mean? It effectively means that it would be easier for us to protect the region's natural systems in compact scenarios because the footprint of development and growth would be smaller. Similarly, we found that in compact scenarios, there is less pressure on the region's agricultural resources, agricultural areas. And this meant that in compact scenarios, the region's economy is more dynamic and resilient because development doesn't encroach on agricultural land. So we did this analysis for not only land use, but we covered every single topic that was presented to you across the throughout 2023. And as you can see, this is a list of the findings that align with our regional goals. And as I mentioned, the memo has more detailed versions of this, of these findings and the alignments. But the main finding that came out of this was that, as you can see, there are far more alignments under compact scenarios than there are in dispersed scenarios. Each scenario comes with alignments and misalignments, but in comparison, compact scenarios tend to create more alignments with our regional goals. And dispersed scenarios provide fewer opportunities for alignments for reaching our goals. So in effect, it is fair to say that it's a lot easier to reach our goals in compact scenarios. So there are two main takeaways from the study. The first one is that regional goals are easier to achieve in compact scenarios. And the second one is that we face more challenges to achieving our regional goals in dispersed scenarios. So far, I gave you the findings of the analysis. Now, this is the moment when we start talking about how do we respond to these futures. We can face any one of these. And we are not looking for answers to the questions that I put on this slide, but I just wanted to put them out there so that you can see what types of questions underlie our analysis. So the questions we asked were, how do we guide growth to achieve our goals under all potential futures? Are there robust policies that could help us achieve our goals in all scenarios? How do we tailor policies for different types of communities? So the analysis we have conducted provided some answers to these questions and suggested some high-level policy guidance informed by these findings. And this high-level policy guidance principles state that we should guide the region toward compact growth and development to move the region closer to our regional goals and promote compact development to address the challenges present in dispersed scenarios. So the main finding is that we have really robust policies that could actually move us toward our goals under all scenarios, and policies that encourage compact growth and development could take us closer to our, could move us in the right direction. And under dispersed scenarios, communities still could guide development in a compact fashion to address some of the misalignments that come up in dispersed scenarios, but they still have the tools to be able to do that. In fact, council and communities could collaborate on encouraging compactness in general. And how does this high-level policy guidance show up in our policies? And I want to give you a couple of examples. The first example is from, again, land use. And our colleagues from LPA have been here before you talking about some of the density policy concepts. You have heard about these. I don't want to read the slide, but one thing I want to note is that these policy concepts are all poised to promote compactness in conjunction with the findings of our study. Another policy example comes from housing. When we looked at growth scenarios, we saw that growth in general could lead to displacement of low-income residents. And this is really not an urban issue. Our housing colleagues tell us that this could be a problem across the region. But the upshot is that we need to make sure that our housing plans include policies to prevent displacement. And policies such as building affordable housing in places where displacement risk is high and preserving naturally occurring affordable housing in those very areas are effective ways of handling anti-displacement. And finally, I want to give an example from our land use and transit, or transportation policies, and talk a little bit about how a better alignment of these policies might help us advance regional goals in dispersed scenarios as well. For instance, by aligning land use and transit, we can make transit more viable for a larger share of our residents. For instance, in Arden Hills, we observed this. Most suburban communities are indeed interested in transit, but most of the time they lack the compact and connected development that is needed to make transit more viable. So council and communities could collaborate on encouraging compact and connected development around potential transit station areas, and also invest in transit, which connects activity centers. I think that is my last slide. Thanks for your attention. I'll turn it over to my colleague, Dan Merkel, for whatever show comes next.
It's on you, Dan.
No pressure. I get one slide, so this will be pretty quick. Since Lisa Barajas can't be here today, I'm sort of your replacement Lisa for what that's worth. It never hurts to go back and look at the big picture here. So what I'm going to just mention is what can you guys expect to focus on over the next 10 and a half months and into the future? These are the steps that the development of the plan is going to go through, and they look fairly tiny on the screen. Hopefully you can read them, but not in great detail. That pinkish line is the regional vision, values, and goals that the council's been working on for a long time that's incorporated in this work. That will continue to get refined a little bit, but it's very solid as it sits. Staff is crazy busy working on the document prep and actions, document prep with policies and actions to get to a release version for public comment. So right now, back in our cubicles, everybody's busy working on this. Your job, hopefully, is to help us continue to clarify the objectives and policies and actions. The work that Arish is talking about, the scenarios information, she's giving you the top line version of that whole exploration. There's lots of details that are going to show up as we're talking about the specific details, specific policies and actions as they come forward. So you could expect it to reemerge, but you've heard now the sort of big picture of what it is. Light green, there's going to be a comment period required. You can expect to listen to folks, to communicate with them, and those will be a lot of good conversations when the document, Imagine 2050 document's out for public review. And we will respond in that blue section. We will be revising things based on public comment, based on all the cumulative discussion going forward. And everybody cross your fingers, in about 10 and a half months, February of 2025, this thing should get adopted. That's the schedule it is, which kicks off the next phase, which goes into local comprehensive plans being developed. And so there's always lots of discussion around that. The message I want to leave with you is there's a ton of information from this scenario work that's available, and we will bring it forward as we see it useful for the discussions in each of these phases. And don't hesitate to ask if there's any utility out of all the work that we've been done. Staff across the council have done a ton of work on this, all that analysis, all that compilation. And I think that's the end of my slide. Thank you. If you have questions.
Directed to him.
I was going to say directed to Rich. As an information item, we're here for your
Thank you.
pleasure.
This is really helpful framing as to what we are approaching, and gosh, give us the kind of top line, broader picture. Is there any question? Yes, we do. Councilmember Chambliss and then Johnson.
Thank you for the presentation. This information is very interesting and very comprehensive. I know that the analysts went pretty deep in looking at the various scenarios, and it's nice to be able to see the graphics to show the framework for which you did your work. I do have I think, quite a few questions, and I'll probably be requesting some of the background information related to all the scenarios, because you kind of focused in on the condensed as far as how that aligns with our current goals. And my question is, are we doing an evaluation of our current policies and goals as they relate to some of the other quadrants on your compact versus dispersed and growth and low growth areas? Because I have a feeling that there are some areas that could be better serviced if we were to look at, for example, some of the dispersed growth areas and in transit, like our transit market areas. I think that some of the results that we're getting from our current policies could have some gaps. And I'm wondering, how do we identify where those service gaps are as they are aligned with our policies and goals? Because sometimes I think if we just focus on one quadrant at a time, we're not necessarily addressing those gaps. I did like, seeing that it's possible to use the compact approach in the dispersed areas because of the success that we've seen with the compact development and the positive results on behalf of the community. Should we be doing more of that in our policies so that we can better address the different communities and the different areas' needs? So I think that evaluation would be really good. And in terms of the addressing the anti-displacement, I think we need to look at both affordable housing and opportunities for good-paying jobs to address those issues so that people can stay in their communities. If we build our policies and our actions and our strategies around development that creates good-paying jobs, then that's another way that people may not be displaced. And it also allows people to have a larger range of housing options than just in movement through the different phases of housing and flexibility there. And I don't want to get into why, but I think that we should always be challenging and finding the gaps so that we can better address the needs.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any response to that? No.
I should mention that we primarily focused on the compact versus dispersed because all of the findings held across growth amounts. So even if it was high or low, all the performance of compact versus dispersed was the same. And I've heard this question before, what happens in low growth scenarios? Those are, all the findings we can talk about in here pertain to low growth scenarios as well as high ones. That's one of the reasons I focused on compact versus dispersed. So I don't know if that addresses your question, but I feel like your question is a little deeper than what I'm saying right now. And I'd like to give it a thought and then get back to you if that is okay with you, some of the questions that you have.
Yes, and I'm happy to follow up with you on that because, how are we addressing those low growth areas? Are we in terms of our service? Mm-hmm. And how does that relate to our existing policies in terms of its impact?
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Johnson, you had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have a couple of different questions. So in the light green box, how much do our city partners, how are they tracking with us on this right now? Because, when this is released, they'll be one of the largest audiences. And so I'm just wondering, how have they been tracking with us on this? How have they been engaged to understand what the goals are and the methods are and this compact versus dispersed? How have they been brought in so that they will recognize what they see as something that they at least have been in conversation about or been made aware of or maybe deep conversation about? That's my first question. And then I have just a couple more after that.
Yeah, I think local planning assistance colleagues, unfortunately, none of them are here, but I do know that at least through Metro Cities, they've been reaching out to communities, and we had engagement with them and just about the scenario planning. Other than that, off the top of my head, we did have some engagement with technical advisory groups, some of whom had representatives of cities as well. Dan, can you think of any other engagements?
Sure. It varies by technical area and by policy area as well. So what I would say we relied on for a lot of the discussions when we were engaging with folks outside of the council, and I won't call it deep community engagement yet, but our technical advisory committees, Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Commission, the folks working on the water supply plan, people who are, work for cities essentially in some counties.
And are they, Mr. Chair, just for clarification, are they
Sure.
city employees or are they contract firms that work with cities? My question is really that city engagement.
Off the top of my head, I'm gonna say 80% city employees,
Okay.
for sure. In some cases, utility employees and et cetera. But with those audiences, we typically focused on that green square, that's just the framework, when we would ask questions like, what do you think would happen to your city if it was a really high growth area that was dispersed? And folks in Prior Lake would say, oh geez, then we'd have to, add more pipes to our water supply network. In that kind of a response. So I'd say we've tested this framework with a pretty broad variety of city and county, some electeds and some staff types. And that's the direction that section about engagement is intended to go for. Now, I will say that light green box, that's tied to the official public comment period. And by the time we get to that period, it's kind of hard to have like fundamental questions asked. We hope that our advisory committees and folks would represent those things. So what I'm gonna say is, let's get back to you on all of the additional engagement that's happened leading up to the policy development that's going on right now, so.
All right, I appreciate that. And I think it's just really incumbent upon us to recognize that for this body, cities are our largest partner. And I think it's really important that we have, we can't talk to all of them, but we need to make sure that at least there are those representative touch points, which I think you're referring to. And I just know that, words mean things. So just having some really grounding and understanding before we get to the release of the draft is important. I've been through many of iterations of this type of work ahead as a city official. Sometimes it landed well, sometimes it didn't land well. And I ended up coming here, as a matter of fact, on one scenario. And I'm just cautioning, the more you can, if anybody, again, is in my district talking to any of my cities, I would like to know how much they've been engaged. I've yet to have an answer to that question, and I think I've asked this dozens of times. And I just think, it's important that we get a good grasp of those important partners who will be working then on their comp plans based on all of this, that they are substantially in agreement of where we're all trying to go as a region. And there are no misunderstandings, and there might be some anomalies, of course, here and there throughout the region. It's a big region, but I think that relationship is very important, that we proceed at the speed of trust. So that's number one. And then number two, my question is, and I think I might have had this in our work group on Wednesdays, but we've seen some of the growth projections in the region, and I would say a lot of it, that's a very non-technical term, a lot of it. I think there's substantial growth that is showing that it's kind of going north and west, but there will be growth in the whole region. Mm-hmm. And I have a question around, because those are market trends, and this is based on market trends. So how much are we working with the real estate professionals and those that can, see what those trends, developers and so on, are doing? And does that match the land supply with the MUSA lines out there. So when we say, oh, we have enough land supply in the region to accommodate the growth, well, the market, though, decides, where they want to move to. And so, is one part of the region going to be constrained? We can't tell people where to live. And so that's just a curiosity of mine as well. So I appreciate this presentation because it's very clear. And I'll just go back to one last thing, and I think some of my colleagues might appreciate this. Words matter. And I just have to say, compact is a great word, except it does freak out city officials. And, I think some of us have bantered a bit, like what else, what other description, I think we know what we're trying to do is manage growth so that we can take advantage to a higher degree of the built systems and infrastructure that we have in place and not negatively impact the environment. But there's just been history over the years too of some reaction that might not even be what the marketplace is asking for. So I just put that out as a cautionary tale about the words we use. And, we can get more into it as the entire guide is coming together. I know we've got pieces of it showing up in our inbox and people are jumping into it. I need to do that this weekend. But I just want to make sure that, we recognize that cities are the biggest partners, and you've got the counties and the townships, and of course, we're impacting everybody. And we won't be implementing this, they will be. And they'll be coming through us to make sure that it matches. But I'm just trying to understand how much of a departure, if there is a departure from what we're trying to do here that we maybe did in the 2040, because the 2040 plan is in place, and if there needs to be changes to that to substantially meet where we're going, that's an issue that cities really have to grapple with. And so I don't know if this is an adjustment or if this is more of a greater departure. I don't know yet, so I'm in learning mode.
Councilmember Johnson, maybe I should just give you a brief description of what we've done just with the model. We're using the same forecast model that we normally use for our projections for the communities. And this is a real estate model. And it basically, all we've done is we simulated, we attributed, or I shouldn't say that, we let the model assign people in the densities that are allowed in the comp plans. So it is a market model that operates on its own. All we said to the model is, if we're gonna have a compact scenario, put the higher end of the densities in the locations where the cities want it. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, these are all things that the cities agreed with. We're not coming up with an imposition about you need to grow in here or you need to grow there. This is just simply the market manifesting itself. We just tweak the models to come up with a scenario where, what if people lived in this case? Mm-hmm. So in that sense, the scenarios, I think maybe we should be more clear with our counterparts, with our cities and townships, that we're really trying to estimate where, or get a good guess of where the market is going to show up. Mm-hmm. So if you think about it like that, it has value for cities as well. Instead of having one single forecast, they can just look at an exercise like this and say, it is likely to have this kind of an impact if this future unfolds. What do I do then? Mm-hmm. It helps them to plan for infrastructure. It's just an exercise in imagining different futures and how you can optimize your planning for your community. But it is really, there's no imposition on the part of the council. It's just a hypothetical exercise and in alignment with their own decisions as to where to put density, basically. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that helps me a lot. And I probably should have said this sooner, and I'm not saying I agree or disagree, but I know we were talking about raising the minimum densities. So, how does that all fold in? And I don't need the answer tonight. I'm just trying to channel in my head the things that, at least a policymaker would be asking in this process that we're in. So I appreciate that, and I'll continue to watch with great interest as it proceeds through the official process here at the council.
Okay, we're going to have one more question because we really want to get to our transit overview too. Wendy, you had your hand up? Maybe two more questions. Gail, too.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel bad about cutting this short because I think it's an important conversation to have. And I appreciate the answer to the last question, but it kind of turns itself on its head when you follow it with, how would we have robust policies that make the compact scenario happen? Because that implies that we're going to tell people what choices they have to make in the marketplace. I think it's good to know that we can accommodate different choices, but ultimately, people decide to put their money down on a house or an apartment or a business that meets their needs in the location that they want. And I don't want to lose sight of that, because we can't make people want certain things. We can accommodate what they want. Like, back before 2020, or back before the year 2000, there was almost no such thing as a detached one-level townhome. Now they're everywhere because all the people that are my age and older want to live in them. But that's an example of us reacting to the needs in the market. And that's what we have to do, is have the ability to react to changing needs in the market. Some of the assumptions I have questions about in the modeling, like that compact makes things more affordable because it drives up the cost of land. When I remember about the same time as coming up with the detached townhomes, having developers call the city of Lakeville. We hadn't finished doing our zoning stuff after we did the comp plan, and they were calling up saying, how many units can I put on this parcel, because I need to know how much to pay for it. So if you up the density, it just makes the land more expensive. And it used to be, before they changed the law, you didn't have to have it zoned for what it ultimately was going to be. You could buy the land cheap and then go to the city and have it rezoned and save money. You could do compact development for a lot less money. In the name of fairness, they decided that we had to have the zoning immediately agree with the guiding of the land, and that drove up prices for multifamily land across the region. So some of these things where we're trying to make things better, we don't necessarily make things better, but ultimately we have to respond to what people want to buy, because if they don't have what they want here, they'll go to outside of the 7-county metro, or they'll go to another region altogether to find a place where they can have a job and housing that meets their needs. So I thank you for this, but let's keep mindful of what our limitations are on the market, because we can't tell people what to want.
Okay, Gail, and then Sue.
Okay, and I think this will be in line with what other people have said, but the modeling is only as good as the assumptions. And I think some of the assumptions we really need to take a look at, because everything seems very black and white. And based on your assumptions, I could have predicted the findings, I think, without going through any modeling. I think it was very clear, based on your assumptions, you were going to get the results. And I'm a modeler from long ago. So you said that every area grows, but that's not what's been happening in the current metro. And so you say that this modeling was the other modeling that was used before, and in the presentation 2 weeks ago, the modeling didn't capture what was happening on the East Metro and the growth. So we're using some assumptions for growth that didn't play out in the past 10 years, but we're using those same assumptions now. So I think we really need to look at the assumptions, similar to what Wendy said, Councilmember Wolf said as well. And then I'd like to see a much more robust analysis of how these impacts align with our goals. It's very different. This is a very black and white set of responses you have here for a very aligned with a very compact set of results, but it's not how people are going to want to live and where they're going to want to live and how they're going to want to live. And that's how these goals, so healthy and safe communities, people are going to say, I'm not living in a compact because I don't think it's safe, but I'm going to live here because I think that's safe. Dynamic, resilient region is to have maybe a mix of rural. So how people interpret those goals, I think a much more robust analysis has to be done on what you presented, because I'm kind of not happy with the way the modeling was done, the assumptions was done, and how it kind of ended up. Because basically when I read the first assumptions, I could have written your results without the modeling, I think. So, and I don't want to get to the light green box to listen to engagement without having gone through a lot more iterations and a lot more analysis and a lot more presentations, because then it's too late. So that's my comment.
Two.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a lot more that I wanted to say, but I'm not going to say it now, given that I know a lot of folks want to get to the next presentation. But I would ask that sooner rather than later, we continue this conversation either at a full council meeting or a committee of the whole, because I think we really need to dig deep into this. We've barely touched the issues facing townships, barely. And having heard a lot from a number of townships recently, we've got a lot of work to do.
You know, I think we've opened up something. We have certainly not closed it. And we will have to be thoughtful about how we set up and continue this conversation. It sounds like more than just where we left off. We'll maybe do a little polling internally as to how we take the next steps to consider some of the issues that you've just raised. And I don't want to, we're not stopping it, but we might press pause and then gather our thoughts and make sure we have a frame those conversations in a way that'll be most helpful to staff and more analysis, as you say. We'll put a little flesh around that, and then we'll reconvene on this issue, on the larger issue about the Imagine 2050. So, thank you so much for your work, and well, don't go far. We will want to continue this conversation. I appreciate everybody leaning into this. We do want to give time for our kind of transit update. Invite Nick and his team. I will say this is also going to be frustrating because this is going to be an overview of where we are with these 4 projects right now. I do think that we're going to have to come back. I will just say this now, particularly on the elements of some of the projects that will require us to do a little bit more deep thinking. I will say specifically the Blue Line. One of the issues that has come to us is how are we applying, as an example, the transit advancement policy, which we will be doing. I'm going to allow the staff some time to kind of start thinking about how we apply it to the Blue Line in specifically, but we have other Purple and Riverview coming up. But particularly with the Blue Line, I want to promise that we will schedule a much more kind of time just for that. So don't think that we're going to be shortchanged just today. This is an overview, but if to the extent that we are ready and want to go deeper, I would say in April, May time period. I'm looking at our RA here who's standing by the fire hose, directing a lot of information and analysis. But we want to make sure we have a full consideration and attention of this council on some of the important issues. Having said that, it's really important that some of us who are on CMCs know a lot about a particular project and maybe know not so much about the others. So this is a great opportunity for us to kind of get an overview about where we are and the highlights of these various transitways. And we'll we'll get back to it. Does that make sense? I'm looking at everybody. All right. Nick, why don't you start us off?
Chair and council members, I hope this isn't a frustrating presentation. I hope this is actually kind of exciting. We have some good news to share.
It is. It's always exciting, Nick. I'll just
Alicia's
jump in
going
there.
to break. Alicia's going to break some new news tonight for you, and some. So we have some good information, and these projects we're going to talk about tonight are advancing and a lot of progress. So the way we're going to present today, we're going to go through each project. The project directors are here. We have a special guest, Stephen Smith, that will be representing the Purple Line tonight. Stephen is the Deputy Project Manager for the Purple Line and employee of Ramsey County. 3 of our projects, we have the deputies, our county staff that represent them, and Craig was out this week, so Stephen is able to step in and answer questions and present. And then I'll sort of close out with a little roadmap of all the projects and what's ahead for the council in terms of actions and info items. And just to note that we'll come back this summer and just talk about ABRT. We like to bring these projects to you at the beginning in the spring and then also in the fall, kind of at the end of the construction season. But ABRT, we usually wait till after the legislative session to give a comprehensive update on that program. So with that, we'll start on Gold Line.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, everybody. So my name is Alicia Vath, the project director for Goldline. I'm going to give an update and show lots of pictures about progress. So I've been here before, but just a few facts for you about Goldline. So Goldline is primarily a bus rapid transit on primarily dedicated guideway from downtown St. Paul through the eastern suburbs into Woodbury. It is frequent all-day service. Our budget is $505.3 million. We are buying 17 new vehicles. 12 of them will be diesel, 5 electric. This project will be making improvements to East Metro Garage. We're constructing 2 new park and rides, 1 new parking structure. You'll see a picture of the progress on that structure in Woodbury. Many new bridges, a lot of pictures of bridges. That's a lot of the work that's been happening over the winter. And with that, I will continue. So this is a photo of our park and ride in Woodbury. It's a 3-level park and ride, just over 500 spaces. So a couple of key facts about this particular facility. It will have operator restroom and break room. So that's really important for our operators, something that they really need. And that picture is just a couple of weeks old and it already looks different. So I encourage you to look by. Progress is really, really going quickly. Next photo, this is in Oakdale. So this is our 4th Street Bridge. So thanks to all of the members of our traveling public, this bridge has been closed since January. It will be closed through the fall. And so this is a combination of guideway bridge that's being constructed, vehicles, and then trail. So busy time for this bridge. You can see on the photo on the left, there's utility supports, or utility that had to be supported for the duration of the bridge construction, and then that utility will be attached to the new structure. Photo on the right are some piers that are being constructed for the new bridge. The next photo, as we're marching along the corridor, is Oakdale Maplewood area. So this is Century, the Century Bridge. So these beams were just set, I believe, last week. It was very quick, overnight work that was done. And so a lot of progress on this bridge. This bridge will also be for BRT and will also have a trail component, pedestrian component. The next bridge is near the Sunrise Shopping Center in St. Paul. So this is the McKnight Bridge. Again, a lot of work happening with this structure, with the piers. So this is also a BRT-only structure. There will be a trail right next to it or a bridge with a trail component right next to it. So just stay tuned for this bridge. There'll be beam set on this one very soon as well, this spring. And then finally, I think this is our last structure. This is the structure that's underway at Johnson Parkway in St. Paul. And so this bridge, I think the beams will be coming later this spring. We will have a pretty substantial impact when this roadway closes sometime in April, still narrowing down the date. But we will be maintaining pedestrian access underneath the freeways. This is a really important trail, so for St. Paul. Then a few photos of our station construction. So the photo on the left is the Maplewood Station, right in front of 3M. You can really see that great vantage point from the interstate as you're driving by. And then the next station on the right is the Helmo Station in Oakdale. Lots of progress being made for all of our stations. And then finally, I think this is our last construction photo. This is systems work. So we're installing fiber along the corridor. The picture on the left is a vault. The picture on the right is some splicing that's being done in the field. So that work is happening. So just one thing to note, I don't have any dates on here. Some of the dates have been fluid, especially with this winter weather that we've had the past couple of days. But we will have a lot of pretty impactful closures happening really soon. White Bear Avenue, for example, will be closing April 1st. And so we do have weekly construction updates that are set out, but we do a lot of door knocking and flyering and meetings with residents and businesses. So there is a lot of outreach that's been happening before these closures. And then a new graphic for us. So the graphic on the right, those are the number of counties that have an employee that's been working on the Gold Line project. So both with our civil construction for Ames Construction and then for the Woodland Park and Ride for Donler Construction. So that represents about 54% of Minnesota counties that have someone working on our project. So that's pretty exciting. The contractors have billed about $25 million through the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program. That's through January of this year. And so that really exceeds the goal that our contractors had. So that's great to see. And finally, budget and schedule. So construction is about 41% complete. That's through January of 2024. Those are the last numbers that we had. A lot of work to do this summer. There'll be you'll see a lot of cranes and bridge work and road work and all sorts of station work happening. We do have about $45 million in unallocated and allocated contingency remaining for the project. So we're sitting in a really great position as far as our budget is concerned. And then in terms of schedule, we are projected to be complete with our civil work in October, and then the Park and Ride work in November. And then our big announcement today is our opening date. So our opening date that we've landed on is March 22nd, 2025.
Yay.
So
We'll be here.
mark your calendars. Hopefully the weather will be much nicer than March 22nd, 2024.
We're going to show that it works when it snows.
And then finally, I think this is my last slide. So one of the really exciting things that will be happening later this fall and into early 2025 in preparation for our opening is what we're calling activation planning. So activation planning is a process that is required by the Federal Transit Administration, FTA, as part of our funding. And so really it's this readiness program so that they can just judge to make sure that we're really have the capacity and capability to open this project and to operate this project safely. So there's a lot of work that happens with our team, with our consulting team, our construction team. Also, the FTA hires their own project management oversight consultant, PMOC. They are very involved throughout this process as well. They review a lot of our documents that we have to prepare to go through this process. So I'm not going to read all of these bullets, but just one of the things you'll see later this fall is buses being tested on the corridor. That'll be exciting for people to see. Emergency preparedness, that'll be something that is new to the East Metro, so that will be something really exciting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim.
All right, thanks, Alicia. Jim Alexander, Project Director for the Green Line Extension. So this image is what's going to be coming in the future with the B-Line connection to Westlake Street. We'll have vertical circulation at both sides of the bridge there, but not there yet. Under construction this year. There we go. So I've shared this slide in the past. It's just all the stats on what we're building for the project. 14.5 miles, 16 stations, and a lot of structure. So where we are currently, we've talked about this project cost estimate, and I want to emphasize this: a cost estimate is $2.86 billion, and it's still being evaluated by FTA. We went through a risk workshop with the FTA and their PMOC back in December, and they are busy assessing what we presented to them. Once we get their final results on where they think things are sitting cost-wise, we will look to establish a budget, an updated budget on the project. And we anticipate, that'll be in the springtime that we'll be coming before you to endorse that budget once that comes to fruition here. And so stay tuned for that. And we are still continue to look at 2027 for revenue service. But we're not going to identify the date at this juncture. So
March.
Stick to the year for now.
Warm months, Jim.
Yes. So similar to what Alicia had for Gold Line, this is our stats for construction workers. You can see about 80% overall, and for the DBE we have $272 million through January, overtopping the goal of 15%. So we're at 22.5 almost. And so we continue to have good engagement there. And my clicker's having a little issue. So in terms of just updates, since we talked last fall on the project, overall, we are just a little over 80% complete. So that's civil and systems. So it's everything all coupled together. We still have a smaller contract that's out for bidding right now. It's the Hopkins Rail Support Facility. We look to bring that forward to you for once we get a contractor identified through that bidding process. That'll be coming up later later this spring, early summer. But quite a bit has happened since we last met. Essentially, LRT track all the way from Southwest Station up through Beltline through St. Louis Park. So about 10 miles of LRT track that has been essentially handed over to the systems contractor. So they're vigorously working on putting OCS, the overhead catenary poles in, and cabling, those type of things. So 11 of those 16 stations, essentially all those from Eden Prairie up through St. Louis Park have been completed. And we have structure in place for the remaining 5 in Minneapolis, but there's still work to be done, mostly on the vertical circulation pieces that we have at various stations in Minneapolis. 3 of the 7 parking rides are completed. And I'm happy to say 29 of the 29 new bridge structures we had scoped for this project are complete. And that is significant. It's been quite a haul getting through all those. We still have some work to do on some of the modifications that we have to do on some of the bridges. Westlake, for example, you saw in that first image, we're doing some modifications to that to allow for that connection between the B line and the Green Line extension. The 62 tunnel, essentially the structure's completed. The systems contractor, I'll have a photo of this. Systems contractor's well underway with work in that area. 6 of the pedestrian tunnels are completed, and 115 of the 126 retaining walls are completed. We have a few more there, the structures there, but they haven't been painted, so we'll get those done yet this year. And then one thing I'm proud to say, the South Cedar Lake Trail is now open from lake to lake. However, we do have some closures due to systems construction because we have traction power substations right next door to the trail. So we're periodically closing things as that work progresses. But we're continuing to look to have more trails open. As you know, I'm an advocate of the biking community, so we'll continue to push on that. And I can't go without saying about the development. It's been tremendous. Around $2.8 billion have built or permitted along the alignment. It's pretty significant. Another $750 million is in the planning stages along the corridor. So just working from west to east, some images out in Eden Prairie. Pretty much systems work. As I indicated, most of the civil is all done. But APJV, Aldridge Parsons Joint Venture is busy putting in signalization and other components of the systems infrastructure. Here's an image inside the Trunk Highway 62 tunnel. We can see the lighting is in place. So, we're about ready to go in that piece there. Overhead catenary, you can kind of see the poles going up and the arms. They've actually been working pretty well. We've actually had a very good progress given the weather. We've slowed down over the last couple of days because of the snow, but because of the weather, though it's been, both contractors have been able to progress pretty well. Still over in Hopkins there, we got the 17th Avenue roadway that's in place, and we'll have park and ride there that's next to the Shady Oak Station. This is essentially a roadway that comes from Excelsior, and we'll create a new intersection at K-Tel and 5th, the border between Minnetonka and Hopkins. St. Louis Park, we have an image of Louisiana Station there with one of the park and ride lots there. And on the South Cedar Lake Trail, we finally were able to get this in operation. So this is the trail bridge over the Beltline Boulevard in St. Louis Park. Now the tunnel. So the tunnel is actually moving pretty well. We have 19 of the cells. I've talked about the 30 cells that the contractor is constructing. They're nominally about 100 foot in length, and treat them as cofferdams. You can see the pool of water in there. We have 19 of those. I think last when I met with you, it was about 12 of the 30 tunnel structures done. But we still have to backfill. We still have to put the trail on top, so there's still a lot more to do there, but working pretty well. This image on the left is called CW8. It's just configuration for the west heading. We have 18 cells on the west heading. This is number 8. As you can see, there's water in this image, and you can see our construction diver that is inspecting sheets as we move along. As we're underwater, we have to check the integrity of the supportive excavation, make sure that we don't have any issues there. But as we evolve on the CW8, here's some more recent images of putting in the waterproofing on the right and putting a rebar for the tunnel floor on the left. Inside the tunnel, we are starting to put LRT track in place. So this is the east heading. The contractor's been busy. I think they've actually started pouring some concrete plinths, which essentially support the rail inside there. And kind of this image, what you can see if you look onto the right there, that kind of level platform, that's the walkway for emergency and maintenance folks, and then the track would be off to the left. And here's the boat section, we call it, as you come out of the tunnel on the east end, and essentially we're done with structure there, as I indicated. And vertical circulation structures, this is both the Bassett Creek Valley and Bryn Mawr Station in Minneapolis. Those are coming along pretty well. And then Minneapolis Royalston Avenue Farmers Market Station. Pause and not compete with the siren there. But, all right, so before I conclude, I want to touch on a topic that's been in the news. I've been interviewed a couple of times. It seems to be kind of a high interest point for folks. The project has been in the news regarding spacing between freight rail and LRT. This primarily regards at 21st Street in Minneapolis. Our design plan has always been that we'd have 25 feet between center line of freight and the nearest LRT track. But we're 7 inches short. I was always assured that we would be 25 feet by our engineers, even going back to preliminary engineering, even double check this, and lo and behold, we're not there. So we're fact-finding right now. We're trying to find out what happened, why did this occur, talking to both our engineer and our contractor to figure out what's going on. We will fix this. This will get remedied. I don't see this as a big issue with the estimate. We're still 2.86. I don't see that being affected however this rolls out. But I want to assure you that we are taking a look at, and we are concerned about safety. We have implemented some very, very strong safety features in here. We're essentially kind of redoing the freight corridor here, both in the Bass Lake Spur that goes out to St. Louis Park and Hopkins, but also in Minneapolis in the Kenilworth corridor. We're improving drainage. We're improving the track. We're also implementing a intrusion detection system. So if that's between the freight and the LRT, so if it's essentially a post that's spaced on periodic spacing, if that post gets hit by a freight rail or LRT vehicle, it'll trigger an alarm to a rail control center. It also triggers our signal system to alert our operators that something's up. So that's a very important feature that we have. We've had that all along, and that's going to be part of our project. We're also putting in new gates at 21st Street Crossing, so that's another safety feature. And we're also implementing some detection systems that will detect certain train equipment on the freight rail side if it should go wrong. And so those things are yet to be built. We're still, like I've told people, we're still in work on this area. We haven't taken this area over from the contractor yet, and but we will eventually get a punch list. But in the meantime, we're going to get this remedied, and hopefully we'll get that done later this spring or early summer. So with that, I will hand it off to Purple Line.
All right. Can you hear me okay? Okay, thank you. Thanks for having me here today. I know I'm not Craig, but Craig is actually, what Nick didn't say, is on vacation in Florida, probably laying on the beach right now, which I think we all wish we were laying on the beach right now.
He's watching you present.
Yeah, or he's doing that. He did actually pop into one of our presentations this week to share a picture of Florida, so pretty funny.
It's kind of.
Yeah,
really.
yeah. So a lot of my conversation today is going to focus on giving you an update on Route Modification Phase 2, which is our study of what it means to be on Maryland and White Bear Avenue. So I have a few slides to really just kind of focus on that information as an update. But as a profile, we're finally getting to the point where we're nearing to the end of our study. We have studied this route for about 9 months now. The team has done a fantastic job pulling a lot of information together, working with our partners. So on a weekly basis for 9 months, we've been working with St. Paul, working with Maplewood, working with our engineering facility staff at Metro Transit, working with service development. So it's a lot of different folks really wearing a lot of different hats, helping us out plan this route. As part of this, it's always been all-day service. It's a 10-mile route, so a lot of what we're going to focus on today is really the lighter purple, which is representing about 5 miles of the 10-mile route. We have about 22 stations, and you can see in the lighter purple, and you can contrast that against what you see in the lighter gray, you see a lot more stations because of just the geography of being on White Bear and Maryland Avenue, more access points. And so we also have more stations too as well as part of being on a street network versus a trail. It's electric bus fleet. We're currently in project development. And our ridership right now, we're estimating between 3,400 to 4,100. And that ranges because we have options right now that we're carrying. So we haven't narrowed it down to one option on Maryland and White Bear. So that's one of the reasons why ridership is varying. And also, I always want to caution that ridership is always being updated as we get new information. We update and refresh our ridership. So this is a draft number right now based on what we know. And our current estimate varies again, is from $379 to $441 million. And again, that's because you'll see here shortly that we're carrying multiple options and we're trying to narrow it down to a single option. One of the things that we're trying to really communicate and drive home is that we understand we're a transit project, but also we understand that this is also transformative and that it goes far beyond just transit benefits. It goes into what it means to be a full reconstruction project. And so as part of that, we understand that there's also benefits related to the folks that are not using transit too. Benefits in the way of reconstructing their whole roadway, utility improvements, sidewalk improvements, all these things go along with what it means to be a full reconstruction project. In Maplewood, for instance, there's going to be sidewalk gaps that we're going to fill. That in St. Paul, there's 100% sidewalks, but in Maplewood, there's about only 70% sidewalks. So that 30% we're able to try to fill in as part of our project. And those are some of the benefits that we're trying to demonstrate when we go out to the public. So this is actually a board that when we go out for our open house, and we just had our first open house last week, we're trying to demonstrate what it means to be a full reconstruction project on top of being a transit project too as well. Another board that we're starting to show the public is really the trade-offs. As we get down to what it means to be on Maryland and White Bear, we narrowed it down to what it means to be on St. Paul, the St. Paul segment, which is on Maryland and going to White Bear up to Larpenteur. So we narrowed it down to about 2 different cross-sections. We have a single transit lane cross-section, and then we have a two-lane transit way cross-section. And so what we're trying to do here in this board is really start showing what we have done in our analysis on what some of the major trade-offs and try to demonstrate that to the public. The public has an opportunity when we have an open house to look at what we're seeing as different trade-offs with the analysis. So a lot of what we focus on is the major differentiators, meaning what it means for pedestrian access, what it means for safety, what it means for traffic operations, transit operations, and property impacts, because each one of these cross-sections generate different property impacts. And St. Paul is a very narrow cross-section. It's about 67 feet of right-of-way that is available to us. So as we think about things of what it means, where this doesn't show a station in it, but it gets wider when you have a station. It gets wider when you have left turn lanes. So it generates different property impacts, which is something that we're trying to also show to the public of what that really means. So these are the 2 options that we're currently carrying in the St. Paul segment. In the Maplewood segment, it gets a little bit wider. It gets over 100 feet in right of way. So we're able to kind of do a couple more things like add a median in the 2 transit lane option. But we're also able to now incorporate a second option, which is center running. So now we have a center running option as one of the options, but it comes with trade-offs. And that's another thing that we're trying to demonstrate where, the center running, it has this benefits to it, but then at the same time, from a traffic standpoint, we know that we're trying to navigate people to a protected left turn because we don't want people crossing the guideway without being at a signal. So that means that we're directing more traffic to a single intersection that is signalized, which might mean that you have to drive a little bit further out of your way to get that left or that U. So there's going to be trade-offs related to all these options. But the nice thing about when we go out for public engagement is that it gives a clear indicator to folks that if they have specific questions about certain topics, we have our subject matter experts there. If they have a question related to property impacts, we have a property impacts expert there. They have a specific question related to traffic impacts, we have a traffic impact person there. So we actually have more boards than what I'm showing you now. It gives everyone an opportunity to see what we're seeing as trade-offs related to these options, and then they can communicate what they think are the trade-offs too as well. So, because one of the things that we want to get to is a recommendation of what it means to get down to one single option. And so we want to make sure that we're clearly communicating to the public what this means to us. So I mentioned that we are going out for engagement. So we had our first engagement session last week at the YMCA in Maplewood. It was fantastic. We had a great turnout. We had probably over 50 people walk in, had great questions, really excited to see the turnout. We thought we were gonna have a great turnout because our engagement team has done a fantastic job putting out door hangers, having marketing, putting out mailers. So a lot of our stuff is also translated in multiple languages. So we thought we were going to have a good turnout. We actually had an excellent turnout. And so we actually have a virtual open house tomorrow for folks that can't make it to a in-person open house. So that's going to be tomorrow. And then we have another one next week. So it's been really exciting. We already had like 66 comments on our survey. So starting to get that feedback. And unfortunately, because it was just happened last week, I haven't been able to process all the feedback. Otherwise, I would share some of that feedback with you today. So as we kind of embark on how do we move forward on our journey, we're in March right now. I have a slide here talking about what's our major milestones. So our major milestones are at the top, and it's related to our CMC. We're trying to work towards, again, that May timeframe is where we would end up getting to a single option in that Maryland to White Bear segment. Then next in June, we would start talking about the Bruce Wintle Trail, because you saw that in gray. Eventually, we need to compare back to the Bruce Wintle Trail option, and we plan to do that around June. We will have our second period of outreach and engagement in the spring-summer timeframe. That would really be to compare it to what we have as the White Bear Maryland option, what we have for the Bruce Wintle Trail option. Ultimately, the goal is to gather a lot of feedback and then get to a single one alignment, and that would be around the September timeframe. So that's when we would have what we call our locally preferred alternative decision. And that's all I have for today.
Awesome.
And we'll close with a discussion on the Blue Line extension. So this is the route from Target Field north through North Minneapolis, Robbinsdale, Crystal, and Brooklyn Park that we've been working on in different alignments since the early teens. We are on what we call Blue Line 2.0, which is the new alignment that was approved by the Corridor Management Committee in 2022. And so this has 13.4 miles extending the existing Blue Line, 12 stations currently. And we are at a phase where we've submitted what is the 30% design to the cities and county and park board to review the design plans. With that, we've provided the cost estimate, which I'll talk about, our first cost estimate. This year, we're going to have two other cost estimates. The next one will come in June timeframe prior to the municipal consent period. We're forecasting a construction start in late 26 or full 2027 with the revenue service date anticipated at the end of 2030 on the current schedule. So this is a schedule we work through with our Corridor Management Committee each month about where we're at. 2024 is a really critical year, so we've been really focusing in on what the schedule is for 2024, because this is the year, timeframe that we are going to officially ask for community support in the municipal consent process. So the start of that process was the release of cost and ridership in the last month that we've shared with you, and I'll talk a little bit about. The next major milestone for that is in June, we released the supplemental draft EIS that is released by the FTA. Those two pieces of information and the 30% design are the information we need before we can go into the municipal consent process. We're forecasting if we start that process, the council initiates that process, and I'll talk about that. But that would begin in late July and conclude in October on the current schedule. By the end of the year, we'll be getting near what would be the 60% design, so further refine the design before we, in early '25, seek a first rating from FTA for the project. So very busy year in terms of important year with major milestones here. The the ridership estimate that we released is we are following FTA guidance on how to forecast ridership. That currently is a blend of both pre-pandemic base and post-pandemic base. The guidance says we blend those 2 points for this year. And so we're forecasting a ridership growth of 11,500 to 13,000 daily riders in 2045. That's combined with the existing Blue Line puts us about 30,000 riders per weekday. Right now, Green Line is the highest ridership line in the transit system. Blue Line existing is the second highest. And by the time both of those systems open, Blue Line would remain the second highest ridership route in our system. So rail remains our backbone of our system in terms of the higher ridership lines. We anticipate that as we go forward, we'll be doing multiple updates to this ridership forecast, and probably one of them will be just post-pandemic. We expect the guidance to change this year from FTA about how we forecast ridership. It's both the number of riders and who we're serving. The model kind of looks at what the population is that is expected in ridership. There's major destinations, of course, on the extension, a lot of schools, healthcare facilities, downtown. If you look at the overall Blue Line, of course, you have the airport, Mall of America, and a lot of other connections. In general, it's a higher than regional average for BIPOC population and zero-car households. Overall, that ridership number we gave, we anticipate about the model shows about half of the riders on this forecast would be from those that have no vehicle available to them in their household. So very high population related to that ridership. Preliminary cost range, our first cost estimate for this alignment was at what we'd call the 15% design. So very early in the design yet. So a lot of unknown, which means we should have a high contingency. So the base cost is what we know at this point, and the contingency is based on recommendation of the amount of risk we still have in the project. So FTA guidance is that we would normally have a 40% contingency at the 15% design. We decided to start with a range of 35 to 45%. This summer, when we do a cost estimate, the base cost we expect will go up and the contingency will go down because we're learning more about what's in the base. And our recommended contingency probably will settle in before municipal consent either at 33 or 37% of the base cost. So right now we're in a range $2.9 billion to $3.2 billion cost estimate. This is factors in inflation of what years we're going to construct the project also. Parallel to this project, we've had a strong, with our partner Hennepin County, anti-displacement effort. We've heard strongly from the community that support for the project is driven also in part for having the ability of those that currently live in the corridor, either as residents or businesses, the ability to stay in the corridor if they want to as a major infrastructure comes in. And so there's this parallel effort that we say is anti-displacement, which is I'll talk a little bit about what that is. It's Hennepin County has been initiating many of the steps on here in partnership with us, but it's both corridor for this project, but it's also regional in nature. It is not just our two agencies, it's the cities along the line, the communities, the nonprofits, thinking through what do we need in terms of policy, how we construct the project, how we manage construction and pre and post development of the project so that we're not displacing those that want to stay within the corridor. So those that live there today benefit from this major investment. We do know, you've seen in our presentations about development along these corridors, these rail projects create massive change in development patterns, and there's just an expressed desire that we really reflect that in having concrete steps for anti-displacement. So we've had this 5-point plan that's been presented to the Corridor Management Committee. Next month in April, we produce the framework, and Hennepin County and Met Council staff will be presenting what's been undertaken so far and what, as agencies, we're going forward with. There's legislation now proposed that is related to this, that as you see, that one of the steps was developing a policy framework regionally and statewide that is being proposed at the legislature. So there's been clear indication from some of the communities that they need to see this in place in order for them to grant municipal consent. They need to be satisfied that there's progress on this area. So the way we think about anti-displacement within the project is there's elements of anti-displacement that are inside the project and some elements that are outside of the project, and then there's elements that occur before construction starts, there's elements during construction, and there's elements of anti-displacement after construction. So the work plan, which we'll be able to share in a couple weeks with you, breaks down by the kind of those divisions about, and within the project is really things that are eligible expenses or processes that the project can implement. A lot of that is around right-of-way and property acquisition and relocation, the workforce that is going to work on the project, things we can do within federally eligible expenditures that maintain viable businesses. And so there's parts of that. And then outside of the project, maybe city policies or other investments that are essentially don't require funding or are not eligible project expenses. So that's how we framed it in terms of the work plan. So looking ahead, some of the actions that will be, again, this is a big year for the project, as the chair mentioned. We'll want to have more discussion with you beyond just what limited time we have tonight. But this is milestones I've talked about. We expect in mid-June the release of the supplemental draft EIS. That's a whole set of new information about what is the impacts of this project if we build this project or don't build this project. And so we'll want to share with you those impacts. We can't really share those until it's released by FTA. That can be right-of-way impacts, noise impacts, environmental justice impacts, all of those elements. Very comprehensive release. And then if there are major impacts, we have to mitigate those impacts, and that's a later stage before it's finalized. We'll seek official requests to set a public hearing for municipal consent, which kicks off the municipal consent process. Municipal consent process is a state-mandated process that has specific guidelines for timing and actions. When we entered the phase we're in with Blue Line Extension, it was a council granted us, we had a discussion last fall about the engineering contracts. You gave us a limited notice to proceed on those with the agreement that we'd come back and ask for approval to proceed, limited notice to proceed to after the municipal consent process. So that will occur, we anticipate this year. And then our capital grant agreement with Hennepin County to fund both the phases we're in the capital. We will need to amend that for if we move forward with the project and amend it for budget specifically because we did not, that capital grant agreement is not funded through the end of the project. We annually usually update that or update that in phases. So that will occur later this year along with all the other projects having similar grant agreement updates. And both Blue Line and Purple Line will require, if Purple Line is on a new alignment or it is ending at a new location, both of those will require TPP amendments for the new routes. And so those would occur in 2025. But those are major stages that are future for this project and for Purple Line. And they'll be going in parallel for that. So So just close here with, we've talked a lot about the 4 projects. There's a lot of information coming to you as a council, both as major information items and major business items. And so this is sort of the Transaway bingo card for you for quarter 2 through 4. Our goal as project leaders is to complete this bingo card and all these actions. So we're about to enter quarter 2. So Green Line Extension, as Jim mentioned, there's some items coming up here. Purple Line in June, we will have a major amendment to the engineering contract. We will want to share the anti-displacement framework and the information from the EIS for Blue Line. So that's in the next quarter. Gold Line's big thing is we're about to go into operations, and so we need a lot of operations agreements that need to get in place prior to that, including things like snow removal agreements with Washington County to plow the guideway and things like that. So Gold Line's kind of focusing on that this year. And then the Purple Line, we will be selecting a new alternative, and so that's a major item this year. And some other grant agreements. So these are just some of the major items we see. Often there's minor items also that we bring forward, minor amendments, smaller actions, but these are the ones I thought are more major in nature, of which are essentially advancing each of these Transways. So we'll pause there and take any questions you have.
All right, that's a lot. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of quick questions. So on the Blue Line, so in June, when we get the supplemental draft EIS, you mentioned that one of the things is that we'll get the property impacts. Will we get the costs associated with those impacts as well?
Chair and Councilmember, the cost estimate that we have, and when we do it, the 30% cost estimate, we will update all our right-of-way impacts. So yes, our cost breakdown, we can get into that detail. We will not necessarily share an individual property, but we'll do it more at the collective nature of how many, a lot of them are minor impacts, but we'll say which ones are full property impact takings, and we'll have a specific budget and how much risk is in that budget. We will break that out. We'll have that breakdown.
Mr. Chair, thank you. As a collective, it's fine, I think. I think we want to understand because this is going more through built neighborhoods than a project like this, like we had with the Green Line Extension. So I think we'd really want to have an understanding of that. And then I had one more question on the capital grant agreement. So amending the capital grant agreement, is this just amending the final total dollar cost estimate? Because the agreement's already in there as to who's paying for what.
Yeah, Chair and Councilmember, yes, it's more of the dollar. We've agreed on the terms and through the life of the project, and the dollar amendment wouldn't be, it would be for the next phase. It would be not prior to construction. We'd probably like a year or a little bit longer of forecasted budget needs.
But the responsibilities are still the same.
Yes, they remain the same.
Thank you.
Yeah, Councilmember Johnson, then Bento.
I'll be brief. So Councilmember Barber has already asked a couple of my questions. So around project costs too, are the mitigation costs and are the anti-displacement costs part of the project too? You know, if we have to relocate people or, you know, they're just, you know, I just want to know the costs associated with that. Have we, I don't suppose we're at the place where we can estimate that yet, but how do we wrap that into the cost of the project?
Chair, Councilmember, that's a great question. So there's a couple points. Mitigation. First, supplemental drafting impact will say what you need to mitigate. And then we will develop the mitigation plans for that. Mitigation elements are project eligible costs. And so we anticipate there might be some mitigation elements that will be costs. So at this point, we don't know what they are, so we just have, essentially that would come out of the contingency that we have, knowing that we expect there'll be some mitigation elements that have cost. Simple example would be if we have to mitigate noise on a property. So yes, we are, you know, within our unallocated budget, there is budget for mitigation on that. So we just don't know what that is yet. We work with, you know, everybody gets to weigh in on the proper mitigation of those elements.
And anti-displacement, is that also
Yep.
eligible for project?
If it's eligible within the project, that's why we really define within the project and outside the project. And so some of the elements for sure would be eligible. A lot of the within the project are related to how we acquire property and if we impact businesses or residents, how do we mitigate so that they remain sustainable businesses, and some of those are eligible costs. So those costs are in that budget estimate. If it's outside that project, it needs a new budget. It's and it has a cost, it has to have funding separate from what we say is project budget. And where that comes from is not determined yet.
Right, and that was where I was getting to on that piece of it, just what's in, what's out, and I was kind of thinking that's where you were going when you were defining that. So that's something that we'll want to keep an eye on, and who's responsible for that? Is it us, is it the county, will the state pick it up, the feds?
Ren, did you answer?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'll just say there's, as Nick alluded to earlier, just to clarify the outside the scope of the project piece, there is a bill that's been at the Capitol this year that would be addressing the outside the scope of the piece. And there's an effort, which would also then answer your question, Councilmember, of who would pay for it.
Okay.
And so we need to keep tracking that right now and then have conversations beyond the legislative session as well.
And so not to get down deep in the legislative rabbit hole, I'm assuming the funding would come along with it, or it would just be pointing a finger at either probably us or Hennepin County, I'm guessing.
Councilmember, Mr. Chair, there's been different drafts that have been there as far as the state fund general appropriation. There's been different iterations as we go, and so
Okay.
it could be different things, but we're tracking it closely.
Okay, awesome. And then just my only last one is, and I'm not sure when you'll bring it forward. The chair mentioned our transitway advancement policy and when we'll start to implement that. I'm assuming you're already doing risk registers and you're implementing that now for all of these. And so when would be the time that we could get kind of the rundown on how that's looking for each of these projects? And then I'm assuming Riverview is still too far out there yet and not in the TPP to get it into our list here. But just knowing that there's a lot of data coming about all these projects right now and how that risk assessment, both for the project and the council itself.
Chair and council members, each project has a risk register for the project, which is essentially risks to get the project open. And as we've talked before, our transitway events policy is also beyond that. So the way we see it, there are 4 transitways, 3 or 4 transitways this year that are seeking to advance that the policy would apply to. Blue line extension, purple line extension, G line, that we are going to ask you to approve the corridor plan, which is essentially advance the project. So we would say that. And then Riverview could be one that applies. Riverview is, they're making a choice this year. You're going to get, the Transportation Committee is going to get an update on Riverview shortly. But it's a choice between, this year is the year where the project decides what mode it is, and then that's really advancing a mode. So that might be something the council wants to weigh in on. So we have the active project risk registers, and then, the first essentially advancing of a project would, I would say, begin in June. So we'd want to have this, as was mentioned, we want to have that discussion before we come to you with a business item that advances a project. So sometime this spring is when we would like to come and talk about the risks and the benefits of the Metro program and overall.
Yeah,
And we have the project risk registers we
just,
can bring.
I'm looking at enterprise risk.
Yep, right.
I mean, we know what the benefits are, that this is a good corridor and all the good things. I just want to make sure that it'll be clear for us and that we've got time to dig into it for all of these and, have some space between some votes that we're taking too so that we can really, understand where we're coming out on that end of it so we can keep things moving forward. And I'll be done here. Just on that capital grant agreement, it's got to be airtight. That was a good grant agreement put in place. And, even an amendment for new numbers doesn't mean we're opening up the whole agreement. It's just to put a new number in. And from my understanding on this too, with the new budget, of course, we've moved it off the original corridor. Costs are going up in the environment we're in. But my understanding is Hennepin County will be seeking FTA funds to make up the difference.
I can just jump in for a minute, quick.
Yeah.
FTA has one relationship, it's with us.
Oh, so we will be doing
So
it.
if we have expressed, a partnership to request additional funds for the Blue Line project. But
Okay.
that is, we are the project sponsor.
Okay.
We are the FTA relationship. And the other thing, I'll just quick, and then I haven't forgot about you, Sue. We're going to switch quick to Deb, but first, all these decisions that we're making, I've kind of made this promise to this body that we would have an opportunity to consider the facts and have a conversation, not the same day we're going to vote on something.
Yeah, thank
Is
you.
that fair? Okay, good. Deb?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for talking about who's the responsible party as it comes to FTA. And mine is similar in line, but Councilmember Johnson, one thing that sets these projects apart from Riverview, is these are Met Council projects, where Riverview is still right now a Ramsey County project. So it does sort of change where we're at in the process.
Thank you.
Sue?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To date, $159.9 million has been spent on the Blue Line. Between now and October, or municipal consent, $36.8 million will be spent. That'll be about $4.6 million per month. 4 weeks ago today, Janet Moore published the article in the Star Tribune about the Blue Line and the numbers. And I've been waiting for 4 weeks or $4.6 million in additional expenditures. And while they're not our expenditures, they're somebody's. They're the taxpayers' expenditures. And I just have to share that I'm a little frustrated because we're not going to have time tonight to have a robust discussion. And I think we've got to have that discussion sooner rather than later. Waiting until May, June, July is too long. We as a council can't discuss this until we all sit down at the table and have the discussion. And that kind of stifling is not what I signed up for to be, as a council member. I do have one question of Nick, but before I do that, I want to thank Alicia for her extraordinary work on the goal line as an East Metro District representative. I have been really impressed with Alicia. So impressed by everything, but most especially a Friday night and Saturday morning email exchange regarding a woman who lives not far from the goal line who was concerned that her CenturyLink was internet service wasn't working because of the goal line. And I made the mistake of forwarding a request for some information from Alicia on Friday night, not expecting to hear back from her until Monday. Well, I heard back from her right away, and then I heard back from her again on Saturday morning. She had done follow-up. So, Alicia, I want to say thank you. And having also been connected for a good period of time during my first term with the Purple Line, I want to say thank you to the Purple Line staff. They've done an amazing job. My only ask of them is if there's any way of taking a certain name off the original route, it would save me a lot of costs. I know that's not possible, but thank you.
We're going to call it the Smith route.
Good, that's good.
Any other conversation?
Mr. Chair, just briefly, can we try to pace at when the next meeting would be that we could, a council of the whole or something, get into this? I agree with Councilmember Vento. May seems very late. And I know when we were voting on advancing these projects, we were talking about that information coming out in March, which is good. But the sooner the better. Just they're also different too, and I think Riverview will eventually catch up. And I just think we have a lot of information that we want to just be able to, because we're trying to, of course, we're not going to violate open meeting laws, but and understanding we have 2 hours and 8 minutes plus for meetings, but I think we wanted to discuss the housing or the development guideline more. We want to discuss this more, and then we stop and we have to wait another 2 weeks or another month, and it really is becoming difficult to govern on things that we want to advance. We don't want to, slow things down. We're just trying to, as a group, have those good discussions. And I just recall when I was newly appointed, and maybe that was just my newness, but we would meet downstairs and we'd roll up our sleeves and we'd have really good discussions about items. And I just really wish we could, especially with these big things that we're trying to advance as a region, we can get back to some of that, where it was kind of more free flow questions and staff was right there to answer and get some of the bumps in the road, or no pun intended, taken care of.
Yeah, fair. I will just say quickly to your comment that this is, the Blue Line is actually, officially is a light rail project. And we have to, in our good conscience, consider the information and the proper and thorough information that is currently being collected. So it's not lost on me, but I will take full responsibility that we are going to have conversations with information. We can have conversations before, but I want to be productive and thoughtful of everybody's time and effort. So I appreciate your frustration. We should have it, but we will not have all the information. We're going to have conversations before June, but we will not have the full kind of SDIS. So that's my comment. Go ahead.
I have one request for information, if it's possible to have it whenever we do have the discussion. And that's the projected investment along the proposed route. Jim mentioned the $2.8 billion that the Green Line extension is reaping, and I'm just wondering if there have been any projections for the Blue Line. That, I believe there was one originally, but I'm wondering if there's been anything since then that could be included in an update in the future. We don't need it tonight if.
Yeah, Chair, Councilmember, we'll have something around that discussion and what the city and county plans are for development around stations. We'll be able to provide a good update on that.
All right, with that, a lot of information, a lot more to discuss. Any other closing thoughts? Regional Administrator, do you have anything?
I got some good updates I'll save for next time, Mr. Chair.
All right, Ms. General Counsel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no update.
All right, this, well, happy spring, it's, I think.
And
We'll
great
see.
job on the State of the Region.
Hey, everybody, great job. Thank you for being there. Yeah, that was really a great send-off. This meeting's adjourned.